How likely is it that one day we won't have the races and ethnicities anymore because people will be so mixed? However much people mix, there will always be ways to divide humanity into groups. Not. Just look at South America and India. Both regions have a long history of race mixing. Both regions are absolutely full of distinct ethnic cultures and different features. Cultures grow and change over time. Maybe in the future humans will be overall more brown in color or have a more unified language, but they will always form distinct subgroups based on things like region and features. This is possible, but it depends on a number of things. Time. It will take centuries and millennia for things to even out travel. People have to be able to travel all over to mix up the gene pool politics. Some places simply don't let their population travel about, or strongly discourage foreigners coming in, e.g. China, Japan culture. Several cultures still regard marrying outside your race, religion or country negatively, reducing the amount of mixing. Geography. People developed different races in part due to environmental pressure. Over the time periods we're talking about thousands of years, it's quite possible that these same pressures will also influence biology. For example, Chinese people are pretty homogeneous when compared to Europeans, in part due to the long period of time where Asia closed itself off from the West. This has taken thousands of years to happen, and Europe still has variety between North and South. So, we may as well just accept that these are just another part of the wonderful diversity in our species and be done with it. Very unlikely. Above a certain size, human populations seem to split. Small groups will stick together, but larger groups split. That could be right or left wing, pro or anti-gun control, different types of Christian, and countless more. We are always going to have different shades of skin color, and there will always be those who will make it an issue. Race is just made up bullshit already. Yet here we are. I think it's likely to happen in already diverse areas, but some countries definitely like to keep to themselves. I think it would be very difficult for it to be a global phenomenon. Race is a social construct. If we collectively decide tomorrow that race doesn't exist, then it simply won't. https://www.sapiens.org biologies-race-real. That's when we start identifying different races based on the shape of our nipples. The nipple wars began. Well, in 2010, the multiracial population was 9 million people in the US. In 2020, it was almost 34 million. So we went from 3 of the country being multiracial to 10 being multiracial in just 10 years. So, while I do believe we will continue to find ways to divide ourselves until we finally achieve a post-scarcity civilization, I think race is going to become less and less of a way to parse the American people. I'll give it 1,000 to 2,000 years, humans are one race. People are always gonna be little bitches about something. They'll figure out a way to be pissed off about it somehow. Down to the DNA or some shit. You have to keep in mind, race isn't a biological term. It's a social cultural term used to describe groups of people with some characteristics in common. So, no matter what genetic changes over time happen, there will always be clusters of descriptors that may be more or less common, and new terms for these races may emerge over time, depending on what people consider a cluster worth noting. For instance, we could as easily define lactose digesters and lactose intolerant races if that was considered socially or culturally important, but it isn't. Odds are good that skin color will be considered as worthless for defining groups as hair color is today. People like to draw lines though, so there will likely always be some groupings referred to, even if they shift and change. Edit. This is obviously somewhat simplified, but the point stands. There will always be inbred people who do not want to be in contact with the rest of the world. Fairly likely eventually, and it's already starting. The number of people who consider themselves mixed has jumped massively in the last 50 years, and the rate will only continue to increase as cross-country migration continues. People are already that mixed. We've been mixing since the Roman Empire and before. It won't happen. Not without amazing wealth increases for the bottom 34 of the planet. All too many people are too poor to migrate around. And it's not like people are dying to get into the interior of China, for example, or much of Africa, or Japan as an island, and one that culturally considers non-Japanese as less than. Those regions have huge homogeneous populations that barely shift about and certainly don't attract enough interbreeding to have any real impact on their larger populations. Not fucking soon enough. No. People will still have preferences no matter what happens, and some will prefer those whose complexion matches their own. Very likely.